Well, hi, everybody. My name is Melissa C. I'm a recovered compulsive overeater. I'm in New York and I'm really happy to be here tonight. Happy to see everybody. Um, so this is a really I think it's a really important topic because there's this you know, in Overeaters Anonymous, we find out that the greater part of my disease, the real crux of the problem is in my thinking, is in my brain. It's not in my body, right? Because once I know that I've got a problem with certain foods, if it was just my body, then I would leave those foods alone and everything would be great. The problem is that I have a mind that brings me back to doing the very thing that I know, like I rationally know is no good for me, and yet I've got a mind that fails to remember that in the moments when I need to remember it most of all, or fails to like abide by it when I need to abide by it most. And what I've found is that, you know, one of the ways that my disease presents itself, comes out, is it makes it seem as though what it is I'm going to eat is harmless, innocuous, no big deal. It's not for me. It's not the cupcake. It's not the cupcake that always started the binge. It was 10 steps before that cupcake. It was making a decision in the moment, um, impulsively. And I know that. And yet I've got this mind that fails to remember that, that tells me this time it's no big deal, minimizes the seriousness of this problem. And so, what does ideals have to do with that? What does that have to do with anything? Well, you know, um, and what are ideals, right? What is an ideal? Because doesn't an ideal have something to do with perfection, like the ideal? and and then the impossible, right? If it's perfection, it's impossible. The unattainable. Am I really supposed to become perfect? Like, is that my solution, that I'm going to be a perfect human and then my brain won't bring me back to the food? And isn't perfectionism, we hear that all the time, isn't that some sort of a flaw anyway, right? And those are just questions to consider. Like, what does that have to do with keeping me away from eating? Well, on page 68 in the AA 12 and 12, it answers this question, that many will at once ask, how can we accept the entire implication? And here they're talking about step 6. Like, why? That is perfection. And this sounds like a hard question, but practically speaking, it isn't. Only step 1, where we made the 100% admission we were powerless over alcohol, can be practiced with absolute perfection. The knowledge that I am broken, that I've got this problem, is done with perfection. The remaining 11 steps state perfect ideals. They are goals towards which we look and the measuring sticks by which we estimate our progress. The only urgent is that we make the beginning and keep trying. So all these ideals that I'm going to be presenting you with, if you said, do you abide by all of them all the time without fail? No, I don't. That would make me perfect. But I aim for them. My goal, right? I shoot for that target knowing I might miss my mark, but I keep aiming for that target. I'm told to keep trying. So while I don't always live in agreement with my ideals, it is the target I aim for. I am imperfect. I am imperfect, but I actually seek perfection. I actually seek to do the best I can do. And I am directed to grow along spiritual lines. That's the direction. In the doctor's opinion on XVI, it says, frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. So The doctor's opinion definitely has a lot to say about allergy of the body. And that's where most people like land on with the doctor's opinion. They talk about the food and the alcohol and the allergy. And that is no doubt super important information, right? It is important. But there's a lot more to that chapter, or really pre-chapter. It's not even a chapter, it's a pre-chapter. Because in the doctor's opinion, I also found out that food was never my real problem. That was not my real problem. My actual problem was a problem I had with living. My greater problem was a living problem, that I had ideals that were grounded in me. My ideals were all grounded in me. I had a personality disorder. That's what I think. It's a personality disorder. And, when I've said that before, it's like, what? What? I don't have a personality disorder. Well, I'm here because I required a personality change sufficient enough to bring about recovery from compulsive eating. It was my personality. It was aspects of my personality that was actually bringing me to ruin. I needed my life to be recreated. That's what the doctor's opinion says. If they are to recreate their lives. So I needed my ideals to be grounded in something that wasn't me. It had to be much bigger than me. And I love when I want to think about my ideals being grounded in something more substantial than ourselves. It's right in Bill's story when Ebby comes in and Bill sees the evidence of someone who's got ideals grounded in something bigger than himself. And what Bill says is this: I saw that my friend was much more inwardly reorganized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped new soil, a new soil. So what does that mean? What I think is that, my roots are the things that keep me in place. They're the things that keep me supported and nourished. And my old soil was soil that was polluted and corrupted. It was not clean soil. My roots were being fed and they were being supported by fear, by selfishness, by getting what I wanted, and by, wanting to feel good, always wanting to feel good. And and so what's the new soil? What's this ideal that's going to plant me in new soil? My new soil is soil that's actually truly able to support me, because that old soil couldn't support me. It's my new soil is my loving creator. It's my new set of spiritual principles. It's these ideals that we get. And in There's a Solution on page 19 through 20, it says this: of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are from their very nature controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Right? So there's an ideal that we're being presented with, that not having contentious and argumentative natures is an ideal. And most of us sense the reason it's ideal is that most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions or attitudes which make us more useful to others. Our very lives of ex problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. So here are our ideals as ex problem drinkers. One, we avoid controversy. That's what we're told right here. Two, we're not contentious or argumentative. Three, we're tolerant of others' shortcomings. Four, we're respectful of others' viewpoints and their opinions. Five, we're useful to others. And six, we're constantly thinking how we can meet their needs. These are some ideals that were spelled right out for us. So what does that look like for me if I avoid controversy? I do my best not to jump into political arguments. I do my best. Or workplace drama. Let's try to remove myself from that. I'm not jumping on the bandwagon when people have disputes, taking sides, repeating things back, fueling the fire, keeping resentments alive. Instead, I seek to be a peacemaker. That is what I'm supposed to set out and do in the world. You know, when a rumor is passed to me, my ideal is to let the rumor die with me, to not pass it on, right? When my family members are fired up over something, and I am a part of a very big, opinionated family, just like me, they've got opinions. My ideal is to stay quiet and positive, to listen and to offer something of a positive nature to the dialogue. The people I love are imperfect. They make mistakes. And I have this incredibly, I have to say, I've got this very analytical eagle eye that can find others' mistakes. And to me, the tiniest flaws in other people can look like neon signs with big arrows, like something wrong here, something wrong here. And it almost feels like it's demanding me to point it out, to talk about it, to change them, right? I'm going to try to change them. I'm going to try to talk about it with others. But that's not tolerant of their shortcomings. Like, why can't I talk about these things with other people? You know, I was thinking, you know, when I've had a situation with a family member and one wanted to tell me what the other one said about me. And I actually, in agreement with these ideals, I have to, I have to, I have to stop that conversation and say, don't tell me. It's really not. It won't bring peace to the situation. And I know this family member loves me, and I love this family member as well. This particular person is just feeling overwhelmed. I have to look to give people in my life a free pass, right? And that's hard, but that is my ideal. That is the ideal I shoot for. Because I know for myself, when I fail to at least make an attempt to live in agreement with that ideal, what ensues is not peace and it's certainly not happiness. I get worked up. I bring, you know, I get more filled with drama and upsetness. And I'm certainly not useful to anybody when I'm in that state. You know, I believe when a family member talks about another family member, my understanding, you know, I can't speak for God, right? But I believe God loves the family. I do. That's part of my conception of a God, that God delights in peace in the family. And the reason I kind of can assume that is I know how I feel when my children get along. When I hear my children have a relationship with one another, when I hear them laughing over something or calling each other and sharing something, my heart is delighted. And just have a feeling that my God must feel the same way about me and my family members as well. So it's not respectful to relationships and families, right? To get involved. Um, you know, and when I say sometimes it's tempting, you know, I believe God, you know, we're told God molds my ideals. He molds them. And so I sometimes feel the pressure of being molded, of being shaped. I feel my own will, my own desire coming up against it, but I feel God's pressure in a loving way, forming my ideals with me, molding my ideals. You know, if my ideals are grounded in myself, then I use moments to trash talk a family member as a way of getting closer to them. I use it as a way of furnishing information so I feel closer to that person. And someone one time explained to me that we call that cheap intimacy. That's feeling intimate with another person at someone else's expense. And it's not actual intimacy. It's not real intimacy. You know, So when I'm at work and I see things that are wrong with whether it's administration or other employees or the education department as a whole or whatever it is, why can't I talk about it? Why can't I just get on that bandwagon and talk about it? Why is it against my ideals? Because it sours morale and it pollutes the workplace and nobody feels productive or overly interested in helping kids when they're all mad, when they're all pissed off about the lousy administration. It makes us far less effective to do the job that we're actually there for. So, you know, rather than criticize, I'm supposed to look for how I can be helpful and useful. And what strikes me is the use of the word constantly. Like I have it capitalized, big, and underlined constantly, not occasionally, not even frequently. It actually says constantly. So we're not promised more leisure time or time to just pursue my interests and desires. I'm not promised that. My ideals can't be shaped around me and my desires. They're just not. So now let's look and see what other characteristics can help us shape our ideals. Well, here we go. In Dr. Bob's Nightmare, on page 180, it says this: it is a most wonderful blessing to be relieved of the terrible curse with which I was afflicted. My health is good, and I have regained my self respect and the respect of my colleagues. My home life is ideal, and my business is as good as can be expected in these uncertain times. And I laugh because I guess times are always uncertain. That must have been that time was an uncertain time, but I would say, isn't today uncertain too? So that seems to be a constant. So what does Dr. Bob have to offer about an ideal? Well, if we look at what attracted him and his wife to the people in the Oxford group, we can learn something about what he saw as ideal. Because he talks about an ideal, his home is as ideal as it can be. And so, what does he believe is ideal? Well, he talks about here at the time of the beer experiment, I was thrown in with a crowd of people who attracted me because of their seeming poise, health, and happiness. They spoke with great freedom from embarrassment, with which I could never do. And they seemed very much at ease on all occasions and appeared very healthy. More than these attributes, they seemed happy. So to me, it was clear, what was he seeking for himself? Poise, health, happiness, freedom from embarrassment, at ease on all occasions. And I would say these are the byproducts of living in agreement with God's will. When I live in agreement with God's will, I get those gifts. I get to have those byproducts. So what is poise, right? It means being comfortable in your own skin, like just feeling, okay about the mistakes that you make, apologizing when necessary, and moving forward. People have poise, they look other people in the eye and exhibit humility and confidence. That's what poise is, right? Not feeling above, not feeling below, just feeling one among many and feeling confident in that. They can hold their head up, they're not cocky, they're not arrogant. A poised person doesn't lose their cool so much, kind of like relaxed and chill. They're patient. I would say a poised person, for me, they're lifelong learners. They're not afraid of learning something new. They continue to grow. They accept new ideas and perspectives. So when creating my ideals, I seek to live with poise. I want to behave in ways that invite me to have greater poise. And it makes me think of the women and men I met in the rooms of Overeaters Anonymous, the ones who so beautifully carried the message to me. They drew me in because they were bright eyed, they were quiet, they were sane, they didn't yell at me, right? They treated me kindly no matter how many times I, slipped and fell and picked up, and they never were annoyed with me for having a problem with the food. They never made me feel like I wasn't welcomed at a meeting because I wasn't, working the program. but I showed up and I was welcomed. And those people, they weren't evangelists, they weren't reformers, they had poise, and they drew me in. And, after our fifth step too, we begin to get some of the qualities that a poised person has. I can easily recognize when I'm not exhibiting poise. It's really clear. I know it. If I come home from work and none of the things that I ask the family members to do are done. I might leave for work in the morning and I have this list of things that everybody should do, right? And I come home and none of them are done. If I walk in the door and I don't respond in a very quiet, sane way, if I like, ugh, throw my bag on the floor and I stomp and I say, I can't believe no one did it. And okay, that's not exhibiting voice and I can feel it, right? I definitely can act like a reformer in those situations and lose my cool. And it's not a pretty moment, and by the way, when I do that, I never actually get the thing that I wanted in the first place, which in this case, believe it or not, was a calm and happy home. Like when I want all those things done, it's because I want to feel calm and happy when I walk in the door, right? Well, if I'm having a tantrum, ain't nobody happy and ain't nobody calm. So I don't get the thing that I was looking for. You know, if I throw a temper tantrum and I bang the pots as I put them away and I grumble and I carry on, I'm not living in agreement with my ideals as a mom and as a wife. It's just not my ideal. How it works on page 69 says this: we do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about it? We reviewed our conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom did we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Were we at fault? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We've got this all down on paper and we looked at it. All right. So I also was told in the book that I treat sex like any other problem. So I can sort of apply this to any other situation. So according to my ideal, I can't be selfish, which means I have to think of others first. 2, I can't be dishonest. Okay, you got to be truthful. And 3, I can't be inconsiderate. I must be considerate. I have to have consideration. So we review the way we behave, and our new ideal can't arouse jealousy. So we don't brag or discuss things that another person is longing for. Somebody desperately wants something and you have it. You don't talk incessantly about it to them so that you make them feel jealous, right? So that you encourage that feeling of envy and jealousy. We're compassionate. 2, we're not supposed to make people suspicious. So we're supposed to encourage people to trust us, not to not trust us. Basically, if you're untrustworthy, if you're dishonest, if you're two-faced, what does that do? Well, that encourages distrust, mistrust. So we're trustworthy, we're honest, and we tell the truth. 3, cause bitterness, right? We don't want to cause bitterness, making people angry and disappointed because they were treated unfairly. Do not cause bitterness, right? Instead, we should encourage delight and warmth. That's what we're directed to do. So in my relationships, I am compassionate, honest, and fair, right? That seems like a pretty straightforward way to be with people. On page 69, paragraph 2, it says, in this way, we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? So in every relationship, mom, wife, employee, colleague, neighbor, sponsor, I'm not to be selfish. Now, in our way of life, selfish isn't just wanting more than our fair share, right? Like in the old sense of the word, like the rest of the world When we say selfish, they're like, oh, you want more than just what's fair for you. And that's true too, but we have another meaning for it here as well. Because for us, selfish can mean wanting others to follow my script, wanting other people to do what I believe they should do. Saying things in my head like they should, dot, dot, dot. Not seeing others' point of view, believing that my perspective is a fact. That's selfishness. Seeing something from my perspective and saying, that's a fact. That's selfish thinking. Wanting things my way, just wanting it my way. Um, Wanting special treatment, wanting to be treated differently, wanting to be treated better, wanting the rules not to apply to me. Too concerned with me, right? Even worried what others are thinking about me is overly concerned with me. And 7, wanting to be looked good or liked. So we ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. And we remembered always that our sex powers were God given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. And I see it that all of my attractive powers and talents, all of our attractive talents, all of the things that make us wonderfully unique, all the gifts that God has given us, they're God-given gifts, right? And some of them were just gifts, not necessarily making you better or worse than anybody else, but just something that God happened to bless you with. And it might be for some people intelligence. Some people are really smart and quick. Some people have wonderful artistic gifts, really good people skills, athletic abilities, have just different abilities that we all come to the table with. Anything that makes us special is God given and therefore good and not to be used lightly. That's what it says, or selfishly. So God will use these gifts and we must allow him to mold us. And I think one of the most amazing things is how so many of our troubling characteristics, mine as well, became reshaped into ones that were beneficial and were able to be put to good use. And in step 3, we turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. And in step 7, we give him everything good and bad, right? And so I think what happens is then God takes these things and either removes them or fine tunes them so that they're more useful for more people. I know for myself, like a perfect example was I'm wordy. I've always been told I talk too much. Like, let other people have a chance. And I still have to like be told how often I can speak because I want to talk all the time. I have to have my own set of ideals when I go to a faculty meeting or when I'm at a team level meeting. I have made a conscious decision. I'm going to let other people go first because I tend to be chatty and I want to get my ideas in there. But when I really allow God to mold my ideals, what happens is I've been able to share a set of experiences that have been beneficial at times, right? And so that's but I have to fight against my own ego because I like to talk all the time. I always like to talk. Um, so that's where I turn it over to God. Page 69, the third paragraph says this: whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we've done harm, provided we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. So at this point, when people are crafting their ideals, they've been abstinent for a bit, right? The food's down, they've been abstinent, they've done. This is the work that we do with people after they've done their inventory, after they've done their resentments. It's typically, a post 5th step / 6th step kind of endeavor that we're looking at. And so we have a clear idea at this point of what our defects or at least what our grosser handicaps are. We've abundantly clear. And we begin to feel more and more God directed. And around this time, we start getting more awareness when we're not living in agreement with our moral code. We can feel it. this is God shaping my ideals. And nobody should specifically tell you what your ideals are, but we know them. We know them. They're here. It's always been there. It's the quiet voice inside that I have always heard. I have to say, I teach second graders. My second graders have it. They have that sense inside. I actually get a funny look on their face when they've done something that they know isn't right. I could see it all over their face, most of them, right? They get this look, they won't make eye contact. It's called a conscience. And I think it's God given. God plants that inside of us. And it's not always, I know for my students in particular, it's not always that they fear the teacher's consequences, but I believe it's the quiet voice of God within. That the most of the rules that I follow are not because I'm afraid of the consequences if I don't, but it's because I know what's right and I know what's wrong. I mean, everyone's is different. Everybody has their own specific conscience, their own moral code, but what feels right. But whatever yours turns out to be, you need to be willing to grow towards it. And when you don't live in agreement with your ideals, you make amends. And not just say you're sorry, but amend the behavior, fix it, do it differently. And remember, I would say that willing doesn't mean wanting, but it means I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm willing to do it. I might not want to, but I'm willing to. In other words, it says here we treat sex as we would any other problem. And in meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answers will come if we want it. God alone can judge our sex situations. Counsel with persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. So we treat all of our problems the same way. And I think that's amazing news. I really don't need to have a different set of directions for different problems. When we have a problem, here's what we do. We ask God what to do. I have a problem? I ask God what to do. We can seek counsel with another person, but we let God be the final judge, not people. This tells me that I don't pass judgment on others either. That's not my job. That's God's job. So what do I do to avoid that? Hysterical thinking or hysterical advice? Receiving it and giving it to. I refrain from both, right? So page 70, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Some people tell us so, but this is only a half truth. It depends upon us and on our motives. If we are sorry for what we've done and we have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and we will have learned our lesson. If we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are the facts out of our experience. So if I make a mistake, right, it means I'm not living according to my God molded ideals. Am I going to automatically go back to eating? Well, I have to check my motives, right? Am I really sorry? Am I really sorry? And do I want to do better? Or am I just hoping to get away with something? I cannot deliberately hurt someone and stay sober. That's what we're told. I can't deliberately hurt another person and remain abstinent, even if I think they deserve it. That's really what it says here. Because I'm not the judge, jury, I'm not the one that's out there giving out the sentencing to people. So if I get back to, the situation, for example, when I come home from work and none of the household chores are done, right? Now I was right technically, right? Technically I'm right. but being right is not my code anymore, right? Love and tolerance is my code. So I have to make amends for coming into the house that way with that kind of energy. And I do. I do. I make that amend. And I know that if I don't make an amend right away, I am risking my recovery. And actually, my life. That's what it tells me here, that I'm risking my very life. And if I am saying that my clean house that I long for is worth dying over, because that's what this says, that's crazy, right? That's really what it is. If it comes down to, if I'm not sorry for my behavior, for having a temper tantrum, for throwing a fit, then I am saying that the cleanliness of my kitchen has greater value than my life. And that makes no sense. Right? Another thing that I absolutely cannot do if I plan on staying recovered and protected is I cannot lie. Why? Why is it? Well, I love when Janet says it's like we put a do not enter with Sharpie, right? Right across my forehead or across my heart. Don't enter, God. Keep out. And I think like this too. When I lie, I think what I'm really saying is, I don't trust you, God. You work for me. I've got a plan and I will manipulate the truth so that my plan comes to fruition. Right? I say, get out of the way. I'm not interested in receiving your help today. I got it under control here. And we know that is a recipe for disaster, right? So, I think about it like this. If I'm telling God, I don't require your help, I've got this, I won't get his help, right? And I think for me, I like to think about God, and one of my conceptions of God is the best, most skillful teacher with the perfect lesson plan. And it's differentiated, it's different for each and every one of us. He knows exactly what we need to learn, he knows exactly the best way to teach it to me. And when I lie, I'm saying to God, I don't need to learn anything today. No, thank you. I don't want your lesson, and God gave me free will. And if I don't want to be taught, so be it, right? I won't get taught this time. But I think I will get an opportunity to learn that lesson again. Only I found my experiences, if I don't learn it the first time, the second time, it becomes more painful. The lesson becomes a more difficult, more painful lesson to learn. Page 70, paragraph 2 says this to sum up about sex. We earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, and for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves and quiets the imperious urge, that craving, that impulse, that hunger, when to yield would mean heartache. So in all my relationships, what do? I pray for the right model, for help and clarity. When I'm unsure and confused, for rational and stable thinking. That's what I ask God for. Give me rational thinking. And then I ask for strength, which is God's power to do what is right. If a situation is difficult and overly tempting, I throw myself into being of service. I focus on someone else's needs and I make that my project. I have to get out of myself. Page 66 and How It Works says this. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison. And that's a phrase that I turn to a lot because it reminds me that as an ex-problem eater, I have a very unique set of directions. It's different from the directions that normal people have. I cannot defend and support my side and my position. In fact, I actually have to do this. I actually have to divorce, separate, disconnect, turn away, abandon distance, split, detach, all of that. I have to detach myself from my own thinking, from that kind of thinking. And into action, page 83 says this: we should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. As God's people, we stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. And what this tells me is that I might be putting other people's needs ahead of my own, but ahead means that my needs will still be considered, just not first. I just don't get to put them first. I am a child of God, right? Of my loving creator. And I believe that it is disrespectful to God to be putting myself in a position where I am courting humiliation, right? Where I look to inflict greater pain and abuse on myself. We're not servile, right? We are of service to God. That's it. Servile would mean I'm in service to other people. I grovel before other people. And that's not the case here. We are not, God will direct me as to whom and to how to be helpful. We are not at the beck and call to sponsees, to sponsors, to our families, to fellows, to any other human being. I don't believe that God will leave me of the bondage of food to be anyone else's doormat. That is not what this is saying here. So my ideals have to be healthy, and they have to have healthy boundaries in there too. My healthy boundaries are in there too. And those of us that have been people pleasers, you know, I put in there manipulators because that's manipulation. Um, if I'm overly concerned with other people's happiness and their well being because I'm a people pleaser, I'm not really concerned with their happiness and I'm not really concerned with their well being. But I don't like the thought. My problem is I don't like the thought of someone not liking me or being displeased with me. Whoops, I had to close that door because it makes me uncomfortable to think they're not happy with me. And and if I buy myself some comfort and happiness by making sure that you're happy or you make me think that you're happy, it's actually an unkind thing to do because it's making happiness king. Happiness is not king. And if I say things like, I can only be happy if you're happy, I am holding you responsible for my happiness. That is an unkind burden to place on someone else's shoulders. It is nobody's job to make me happy. It's not their job. Other people I love can be just as happy, unhappy as they choose to be. That is their choice, right? Um, so, if I get back to that housework example, if I'm in a calm demeanor, I can discuss in the morning what needs to get done. I'm reminded of the obligations that my kids have as family members. I can be quiet, sane, basically poised, and it's far more effective. Now, it also might mean that I have to follow through on consequences. I didn't like those consequences. I didn't like having to dole them out. If things weren't done, I didn't want to dole out the consequences because I didn't like the the pushback that I would get, the pouting, the stamping, the sour face. Um, and sometimes that also means that I have to let natural consequences do the instruction. And I have to stand by and allow other people I love to feel the discomfort of their own decisions. Sometimes that's actually kind. Get out of the way, right? And allow the consequences to be the instructor. Page 84 says this: our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. And I think of this in the St. Francis prayer. And sometimes it's referred to the 11-step prayer. It's my function. My job is to be understanding, not understood, to be helpful, useful, and valuable. And, we find out in our ideals that we get a code. It's love and tolerance. That is the code we get. And my code is my policy, it's my protocol, it's my standard operating procedure. It's not justice. It's not fairness. It's not getting my way. It's not ease and comfort. And what that means is I need to have tolerance of others and I need to tolerate, which means to build up my sensitivity to my own discomfort that might get stirred up when others do whatever it is they do, right? And here we're told we cease fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. We avoid retaliation and argument, and we take a kindly and tolerant view. So we don't fight. That's part of my ideal. I don't fight. I don't get people back. I don't go back and forth, tit for tat. You know, I'm going to kind of close with this. In the chapter to wives on page 118, it says this: we women carry with us a picture of the ideal man, the sort of chap we would like our husbands to be. It's the most natural thing in the world that once his liquor problem is solved, to feel that he will now measure up to that cherished vision. And the chances are he will not. For like you, he's just developing, he's just beginning his development. Be patient. So I would say this is a word to all of us here, that I'm living free of the food, right? I can't expect perfection in the home just because I'm doing better. Can't expect perfection with my loved ones. I need to be patient. And I also need to be patient with myself, right? That I am not going to be perfect. I remember that these are ideals, the perfect model. And although I can strive for the target, I often miss the mark. And with that, I'll pass.